It is another edition of the On the Mic podcast, and as I've been saying that over the past few days here with coverage of Bellator 291 completely underway, taking a step away from the Bellator coverage to speak to a man who knows Bellator inside and out, knows the UFC inside and out, knows everything combat sports inside and out. I haven't talked to him in a very long time. Before I introduce him, really quick, I just want to say, you know a good person when you haven't worked or talked to them in a very long time. You pick up the phone, you reach out, and they respond, and they agree to come on your show. He is one hell of a person, the one and only Jimmy Smith. Sir, how are you?
Enough with the praise. Come on, stop. Really? Seriously. No problem at all, man. Appreciate the invite, Robot Mike.
that will always be the memory I have.
That will always, you are in my phone as Robot Mike. It just is what you are.
The fact that I'm in your phone makes it all worth it. I don't care what it is at this point, but Unlocking the Cage, weekdays 2 to 5 on Sirius XM Fight Nation channel 156 for Jimmy Smith. First and foremost, I just want to catch up with you because we worked a little bit together at Sirius XM. COVID and personal life brought me back to Chicago, but you spent some time in WWE. We're still doing Sirius XM. Now, WWE is no more, but I thought you were great there. What has the past couple of years been like for you?
It's crazy. It's insane. I mean, I get asked a lot, a lot of people were, man, you all right after WWE? I said, I didn't expect to ever work for the WWE. It's not, it came out of absolutely nowhere. The opportunity, the audition, everything, going from there to Raw came out of, once again, absolutely nowhere. It was just, hey, by the way, can you do Monday Night Raw? And I went, when? 10 days from now. The Monday after, it was Friday, and they said, Monday after next, can you start? Having never ever done a play-by-play at all for any major promotion. I only done play-by-play twice for Titan out here in Florida. Just for the hell of it. It's a local promotion out here. That's the only time I've ever done play-by-play in my life. And then can you take over the number one rated show on cable in its time slot for the past 30 years, and out of the blue, having not watched pro wrestling in 30 years. And I went, okay, sure. And I did that. So it was just one of those things you almost look back on as, I mean, I don't know how many people have these experiences, but I don't know, just, hey, I worked in Singapore for 2 years for, these weird chapters in your life. And what you were doing there? Well, it's a long story, but it's like that. I just see the WWE in that way. It came out of nowhere, left out of nowhere. It just, it was one of those things. It just came out of left field for absolutely no reason. And I ran with it, had a great time for a year called WrestleMania. And so, that's how I see the whole experience, man.
That's awesome. And as a compliment to you and your talents, that you were able to kind of just on a dime, just, start covering it. One thing, and it's not about any specific person, but one thing I am seeing, I grew up, in the 90s, early 2000s, watching it, kind of got away from it after a while, once I hit 17 years old. But it's starting to feel like the MMA and WWE worlds are colliding more so now, more than ever, when you consider broadcasting and hosting and everything. Now we've seen, pro wrestlers try out and MMA, we've seen, and vice versa. But now even reporters, commentators, analysts like yourself, they're kind of intermixing. And we know over the last few years, Triple H has taken over, kind of a lead role. And I don't know what's going on behind closed doors with Vince McMahon, but since really Triple H has kind of taken over the reins completely, I think we've kind of seen that mix together more. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, they had nothing to do with one another, a couple decades ago, that they were, one world and the other. Ken Shamrock came over and did it. Dan Severn early on did it, but really in the height of the Attitude Era, there wasn't much crossover at all. The problem is, and I haven't spoken about this very much, it's you see the differences once you're, people who, they do, if you do sports broadcasting, all right, if you do Bellator, when I went from Bellator to the UFC, there was no real difference. They don't speak a different language. They don't want anything different of you. I did the same thing in Bellator I did in the UFC, and there was virtually no transitional issues at all. When you work for the WWE, there are a ton. They just, They speak a different language. They do it their own way. They do it a very unique way that doesn't make any sense to anybody else. And they constantly tell you that, by the way, that, yeah, this is just our thing. It doesn't make any sense anywhere else. And so the idea that you can just bounce back and forth and do both, it's absurdly different. And I was still adjusting to and absorbing those differences the entire time I was there. I never got particularly comfortable because the first thing they told me is you're playing a commentator on a show. You're not commentating. And it's not real commentary. You're not actually commentating. So, because in commentary, you're on the same side as the audience, right? You're on the same side as you don't know. I don't know anything more than you know. And once a fight starts, I know more than you do about the fighters themselves, but I don't know what's going to happen any more than you do. I'm not following a particular storyline. I'm not, I'm on the same side as the audience. I want to know what's going to happen too. I'm sitting here going, I want to know what's going to. Well, and that's not the case at all when you work for the WWE, where you're part of the theater that people are seeing. So the skill sets are radically different, both in terms of commentary and in terms of performance, where if you go out there and try to shoot, meaning actually fight somebody, you're going to get fired. You get fired. And you need somebody in the teeth, watch what happens. You're going to get fired. That's going to get your papers. And so when in combat sports, that's my whole point, is to, crush your skull. And if, whatever it takes, I'm going to do it. So the skill sets are both in performing and broadcasting radically different. And you have to understand those differences in order to have any success there at all. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm talking to you at a perfect time. We're just getting out of UFC 284 for my money. And I know you cover and like other sports as well outside of the combat sports world. I know you're a big football guy, but for my money in the combat sports world, and I'm talking to a Bellator veteran here, when Bellator goes to Dublin, Ireland, it is my Super Bowl of all fight year. And I actually when I gave my predictions for 284, I mentioned how you called on me when we worked together at Sirius XM. You asked me if I was going to watch Vasily Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez. And I said, yeah, maybe, but Jimmy Crute is fighting on a regular fight night. And you're like, you are going to miss one of the best boxing matches of the year for Jimmy Crute.
It was great. Yes, yeah, it was a great one.
Yeah. And, but I say that to say, for me, I love the Bellator Dublin shows. I don't think the energy is matched anywhere else. I'm going to ask you about UFC 285 here later. I don't care. I mean, I love the Jon Jones return. I love the Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler fight, Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira too. I love all of those. But I don't need 3 title fights at a Bellator Dublin show. They gave us 18 fights for a Dublin show in February. Excuse my ignorance for not knowing if you've been a part of or how many you've been a part of over there in Bellator in Dublin. But that Dublin crowd.
3?
How special is that crowd?
It's fucking awesome. It's fucking awesome. It's great. It's fucking rowdy though. It's one of those where, the good news is the bad news, where like, what's it like calling a fight in Brazil? It's great, but they'll throw shit at the fucking octagon and it might hit you in the back of the head. So there's always that, what makes a fan quote unquote great is also what makes them obnoxious and difficult. Right. And so it's a rowdy crowd. They support their guys. And I remember, calling fights in Dublin, and we were in Dublin and Belfast, and going, well, if this decision goes the other way, we're going to have to get out of here real quick. I remember thinking other times where I was like, this decision, like I'll be fine, but I wouldn't want to be a judge here. And there's always that, man, that's just intensity of feelings and how big it is. And it's rowdy and it's great. And I love going over there. When I went over there with Bellator, I love traveling to Ireland. Every time I had a great time out there. We did some tours out there and fucking great, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and for my money, Peter Queeley's walkout to Zombie is the best walkout in the entire sport, especially if it's awesome. Happening in Dublin. There's nothing better than that. But talking about things getting thrown at those at the broadcast table, John Anik just talked about what happened to him in Perth at UFC 284, and I think it's so interesting because it's easy to say, all right, Islam defended the title. And when I watched the promo, if I was a casual idiot fan, some people still think I'm an idiot regardless. But if I'm watching the promo, I heard lightweight title and I heard #1 pound for pound ranking. Then the rankings came out and Islam was still #2 and Alexander Volkanovski was #1. First off, do you believe the judges got it right? I'm not here to say it was a robbery. I think I hold that for Jared Gordon, Paddy Pimblett. I will go to the grave with that. But did you think that the judges got it right in Alexander Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev?
Yeah, that's how I scored it. I scored it 3-2 Islam. Would not have bothered me if it had gone the other way, by the way. If they had said Volkan, and when they were going to the center of the octagon, I remember thinking, I think Islam won this, but we are in Perth, Australia, and he finished strong. And whenever a fighter finishes strong, it tends to hold a little more weight, stuff like that. So I had my doubts as to whether or not, Islam would get the nod. I gave it to him 3-2. I thought 49-46. Whatever judge said that is out of their fucking mind. But I really thought Islam won it, and I thought it was totally justified that Volk is still number one pound for pound. I really think both of those things were absolutely correct. I thought Islam won the fight, and I thought Volkanovski proved he's a pound for pound number one fighter in the world. I think both of those things happened at the same time.
I think when you're not playing emergency reaction the next day, and you take some time to kind of process it, look back at it, watch the fights again, I do agree. I think in the moment, and maybe you could break it down better for me and for everyone better than I ever could. But for me, my biggest argument was Islam had his back, and I forget what round, for most of the round. And
4.
Yeah.
Round 4.
And Volkanovski's, throwing punches to the head kind of wildly, and they're not doing much. But for me, I was like, really just kind of just holding position there. But, I have a few friends here who are judges in Illinois. Not that, Illinois commission is that great. But anyways, them trying to explain it to me kind of because I had it 3-2 Volkanovski. But I think it kind of showed in a weird way. I felt vindicated that I was like, well, Volkanovski is still number one in the pound for pound ranking. So you can have your Islam win for someone who was backing Volkan that. And really, there's a lot more questions, I think, now than ever to Islam Makhachev's kind of legacy. Coming in before the Charles Oliveira fight, he had not beat really anyone of high regard in the division, but beat Charles Oliveira, now beat Alexander Volkanovski. If you wanted to sit here and have that debate talk of Volk at 155, that's neither here or there. But what does Islam Makhachev have to do? Does he have to go on a Khabib-esque run to really cement his legacy? Because we've talked about so often, we've compared the two and how he's the next coming of Khabib, but he's doing it in his own way. But Khabib was facing top competition, especially later in his career.
Exactly. And what people forget is that I called Khabib versus Ally Quinta in Brooklyn. And that guy, you wouldn't think would have been the number one lightweight in the world. He just didn't look good against. You beat Ally Quinta, it wasn't that close, but he didn't look dominant. And Ally Quinta's not a great fighter by any stretch of the imagination. And Islam didn't look like the best lightweight in the world. And then after that, what happens? He beats Conor. He smashes Dustin Poirier. He smokes Justin Gaethje. He just kind of went like that. Like this trajectory went straight up into the stratosphere. And so that can always happen. It could be Volk just had the secret sauce that was an issue for Islam Makhachev, or Islam Makhachev looked past him a little bit. And, all the kinds of things that if you look at whoever's on your Mount Rushmore of MMA, whoever it is, for example, Robot Mike, give me one of your Mount Rushmore. Who was one of the greatest of all time for you?
Jon Jones.
Jon Jones looked like shit against Alexander Gustafsson in the first fight. I can always, whoever you spit me any fighter is greatest of all time, I can spit you that one fighter that just kind of and remember they rematched and he destroyed him. It was just that one fight, it looked like Gus had him and he was able to gut it out and win or whatever. But no matter what fighter there is, boxing, in MMA, whatever it is, I can give you that time. That one guy just gave him a problem and they just didn't look very good in that one fight. And then, what happened? Jon Jones went on to win, till now, in the division. So it didn't mean it was the beginning of the end. It was just that, the first Gus fight was a problem. And so it could be that. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, he needs to go on a run to solidify himself. But it could be a case of Volk just had the right combination of skills to give him trouble. Remember the first GSP BJ Penn fight? BJ Penn put it on GSP. GSP won the fight, but he didn't look good, man. He was beat up. He was, and then in the rematch, GSP just fucking owned his ass. And so there are many times in combat sports history where that one time he doesn't look good, and you're like, oh my God, if they rematch, and then they end up, just solving that riddle. Also, all pound for pound means pound for pound is in our head. It's an invention. It's, if you were all the same size, who would win? Well, I wouldn't box like a heavyweight if I were 130 pounds. So it's, you're just asking a lot of our imaginations. But one of the things in that fight that I thought was clearly obvious to everybody, if they were the same size, Volk wins. It's when Islam hit him, Volk kind of bobbleheaded, like, oh shit, Volk would hit cleaner and Volk would hit more often. But when Islam hit him back, remember that one time his head kind of rocked and it was like, it wasn't the cleanest punch in the world, but that's a big dude. So I think we clearly saw that if Volk were the same size, he'd win. But they're not the same. You can't magically wave a wand and they're the same size. They're not the same size. And so that's always going to be the issue with a pound for pound debate, is them even fighting in the cage or the ring doesn't prove anything, because they're still not the same size, even though they make the same weight class. But to answer your question, I believe Islam does need to go on a Khabib-like run, win at least 3, tie the record. And remember, that's 1. He's already got 1 down. The record's 3, and it's a 4-way tie at the moment. So it's the only division, 155, that doesn't have a clear-cut number 1 in terms of title run. It's a 4-way tie. BJ Penn, Benson Henderson, Frankie Edgar, and Khabib. They all won 3. We don't have an Anderson Silva that's just like his title defenses are, triple the next guy. Right. We don't have that. So 55 is always going to be like, get 3 and you're there. So, and I think Khabib can definitely do that.
Well, it's definitely going to be interesting. I guess the only other question I have on this is, would you like to see Volk go? I know, obviously, I think you're in agreement. We want to see him go back down and defend the title. Yair Rodriguez looks special against Josh Emmett. But would you like to see Volk one day return to 155?
Maybe. I don't know how much consistent success he has. That's the problem I have is when someone says, I'm going to 55, are you going to win a title at 55? Are you going to defend at 55? Like, what do you plan on doing? Because, those guys are just massive. And he might have the right formula to beat, for example, an Islam Makhachev, but then what? You're going to beat Dustin Poirier? You're going to beat Justin Gaethje? You're going to beat, the winner of Gaethje Fiziev? Are you going to beat those top guys at 55 who are giants? Can you maintain that success? And I think that's one thing that's underrated in modern MMA is consistency. Back in my day, who's the best 170? Well, who defended the title most time? It was GSP or Anderson Silva, or Jon Jones. And now it's kind of like bouncing up, how many belts can I collect, which is more of a boxing thing rather than an MMA thing where it was consistency of title defenses. And I've always been more into the consistency part of it. But to me, it's, what are you going to do at 55? Can you defend both? Because that means fighting 4 times a year, and nobody's going to do that, So it's about how long he wants to stay there. Right? Would I mind seeing him fight there again? No. But shit or get off the pot. Are you going to stay at 55? Or are you going to bounce around and actually defend the title? So that's the interesting thing to me.
But I just want to counter on what you just said there. So then I look at, when you talk about consistency rather than belt collecting, we have, not we, but just so many people in this sport have so much recency bias that, yes, Alexander Volkanovski, one hell of a fighter. He's been on an amazing run, especially at featherweight. But it's like everybody just forgot about who Max Holloway was. And I understand Volk beat him 3 straight times. One was a split decision that Max could have won. But like when we look at consistency, I feel like we also kind of overlook what some of the fighters who are still in division have done. I think the best case and example is Max Holloway at 145 and Alexander Volkanovski at 145.
There's always that number 2 guy who, man, if it weren't for GSP, I think John Fitch is champ. I think he's champ for a long time. If there's no Anderson Silva, who knows how long Rich Franklin holds that title, right? He probably held it for quite a while, but sorry, and for a long time, Rich Franklin was kind of the example of, Jesus, you're the number 2 guy and no one can get past him, but you can't beat number 1. He had 2 chances and knocked out twice. So there's always that, DC had a great run. He's never number 1. There's always Jon Jones. So there's always that guy, and Max Holloway, let's face it, is that guy. I would argue maybe during the Jose Aldo years, it was Chad Mendes. All right, nobody can beat Chad Mendes except Aldo, but Aldo did it twice. So, like, how many times can they fight before it gets old? That's Max Holloway right now. He's in the worst position I think to be in, which is you're the solidly number 2 guy, but nobody's really interested in watching you fight for the title anymore. So you got to beat all the hungry up and comers like Arnold Allen that he has to somehow beat. So he's in a tough spot. And that lack of recognition, as you put it, it's true, but rarely do we sit around and debate the best number twos in a division. Rarely do we do that. And so, yeah, you want to be number one. It's a rough business, and not many people remember number two. And unfortunately, Max Holloway is the number two guy of his era. I consider Jose Aldo the best of all time. The post Jose Aldo era, number one is Alexander Volkanovski.
Well, very well said. I think the last one on the 155, 145 talk, you mentioned Chad Mendes. We have Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler scheduled for later this year. John Kavanagh came out this week and said he compares this fight, Chandler and McGregor, to Chad Mendes and McGregor, obviously different weight class. You know Michael Chandler a long time, called his fights. Would you agree with that comparison?
In a certain way, one thing that I know it's a different weight class, but during the trash talk leading up to this, and Conor constantly calling him a twerp and a little guy. Chad was never a big guy at 45. He wasn't small, but he wasn't big. He was short. Mike's strong as a freaking bull. He's a big 55er. I don't think he's 70 size. And I know this is probably going to take place at 170. He's certainly not 70 size. But that Jose Aldo and Conor McGregor knew they could stop Jose Aldo Jose Aldo and Conor McGregor knew they could stop Chad Mendes with a well-timed shot. They catch him coming in strategically, which is what Kavanaugh's all about. Strategically, it's very similar. I would argue that Mendes had a higher fight IQ than Michael Chandler. Now, I'm not saying he's smart or that Chandler's stupid. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is Chandler tends to have real trouble spending his gas at the right time. Serious trouble. If you can get out of round 1.5 with Michael Chandler, you will almost certainly win the fight. He just has trouble pacing himself properly. And he always said, I'm in great shape. I'm in great shape. Dude, it's not about shape, okay? People confuse gas and pacing. They're two different things. If you don't have gas, it means you just don't have gas and you spend it. He has a lot of gas. He just spends it at exactly the right time. I remember watching him fight Dustin Poirier, and he's bouncing around. And I go, Jesus Christ, Mike. Like, he never learned to relax, which is like one of the first things you learn, in combat sports. He almost fights like, that really talented local fighter who knocks everybody out. Usually they change their style before they get to the elite level, and he just never did. Or he's getting all bound up, and he's bouncing around, and I'm like, God. And then he's 1-1 with Poirier. We're going in round 3, and they posted the odds at the bottom of the screen. They both have the same odds of winning. Oh, it's equal chance of winning. And I remember just rolling my eyes, going, no, there isn't. Poirier's going to win this fight. There's no way Mike has any gas. And I was right. He went for a sloppy shot to, gave up his back and got choked out. It's like he just spends energy at the wrong time. So in that sense of Conor and Aldo both knew I can catch Chad Mendes coming in and put him down. Maybe. I mean, there's certainly the same vulnerability, but in the meantime, he's a lot more dangerous than Chad Mendes was, even in his prime. Mike hits like a freight train, and he's really powerful, and he has excellent wrestling, and he can put you right on your ass. So in the time where he's dangerous, he's more dangerous than Chad Mendes. But I think Chad Mendes was dangerous longer. Chad could beat you in round 4 and 5. Mike hardly ever does.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things looking back at that Chad Mendes fight is in the post-fight press conference. He was like, I don't know what more I have to do when you're on top of someone and you're throwing elbows and talking about McGregor. And he said, I'm hitting him with everything I got. And he's just talking shit from the bottom. He's asking me if that's all I got. I think the lead up to this is going to be one thing I kind of look at the most. I know verbally and the mental warfare, I don't know that either of these two guys will ever get broken by what either one of them will say to each other. But I'm definitely interested in that to see what kind of Conor McGregor comes out. Is it the polite one? Is it the trash talking one? But we've got a whole season of Ultimate Fighter to look up to kind of see where that's going as well.
Do you want to hear a story?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So, Muhammad Ali was taking on Larry Holmes. Now, this is way back. This is 1980. And 80, 81? I don't remember. Anyway, and I read the story about the press conference. And Muhammad Ali is doing Muhammad Ali stuff, what he's going to do to Larry Holmes. And this reporter said there was kind of a buzz around the room because people were talking to each other. Oh, yeah. And it got louder and louder. And then I realized nobody's listening to Ali. Nobody's listening to him. Ali's doing the Ali-isms and all this stuff. This is 1980 Muhammad Ali. This is not the guy who knocked out Sonny Liston. This is not the guy who knocked out George Foreman. This is not any of those things. This is not Ali Boumbaye. This is, you know, Ali's 38 years old, and we all knew Larry Holmes was going to kill him. And there were those few acolytes who were like, oh, maybe Ali can do it one more time. Whenever Conor does Conor-isms, Michael's ace in the hole is, I'm not 1-3 in my last 4 fights. I'm this. You were this and this and this. I'm not saying Mike's going to do that. My point is, we all listened to Conor when he was winning. It just, the shtick gets less attention. It gets a little more dry and old when you're not winning. And it's been a long time since we've seen Conor McGregor win a significant fight. 2016 is the last time he had a real win at 155 that was worth a fart in a windstorm. And so when you look at it that way, you know, well, how's he going to do all his trash talk? All he has to say is, shit, I won more than you. It's, you know, in the UFC, you know, in the last however many years. So it's that idea of, is the trash talk going to be the same? Yes. But is the awe behind it of what this guy can potentially do, will that be the same? Because that makes the trash talk work. You can't really have one without the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. I want to move on because I don't want to keep you too much longer. I want to try and sneak in the 2 upcoming pay-per-views here in March with just a couple questions. Jon Jones is making his heavyweight debut. And as much as we were like, hey, can't wait for Jon to be at heavyweight, I felt like we were also like, hey, if Conor McGregor can stay out of trouble and Jon will finally make his heavyweight debut, maybe everything will align in the UFC. The star power will be back in the UFC. And listen, credit to the promotion. And to the fighters more than the promotion. There are still fighters. Israel Adesanya, you know, for what it was, Jorge Masvidal and the BMF belt. Like, we got some great fights and some newer stars, while the superstars that will bring every casual fan out of the woodwork were on the sidelines. But Jon Jones now at UFC 285 will face Cyril Gane. And, you know, I talked to Devin Clark after his win, and he's been very good, close friends with Jon for a while. And he goes, yeah, Jon's not going to miss a beat. I don't care how long he hasn't been fighting. He is still Jon Jones. He is still one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. And he believes, what a lot of people are saying, is that Jon will try to beat Cyril Gane at what Cyril Gane is best at, the striking, the movement. And, Devin Clark said, who started that? Jon started that. So first and foremost, what do you make of this matchup? And do you think Jon would be wise to try and stand and trade with Cyril Gane?
I think it's the best possible matchup that could have been made with who's available now. I think Francis Ngannou, obviously, I mean, the scariest champion in UFC history versus the greatest light heavyweight in UFC history. I think that would have been a bigger fight. Cyril Gane's just the second best heavyweight. So now he's taking on Jon Jones. I agree with everything that was said. If you look at Jon Jones's history, he is a different guy when he looks across the octagon and someone is his size. He is a different dude. We saw that in the Dominic Reyes fight. We saw it in the Gustafsson fight. Whenever he fights somebody, he's like, they're doing the stare down and that guy's eyes are at his level, it's a different guy. He's used to being able to big brother people and paw at him and use, like you're at a distance. Cyril Gane he's not going to big brother Cyril Gane. There's just no way he's going to do that. I'm not saying he can't win at all. I'm saying mentally, he's got to find a different gear, because every time someone has been able to be just as big as he is, and his reach might not be as much, but damn good. And when they throw a punch, you fucking feel it. That's when Jon has problems. If he can big brother you and keep you outside, he's great. When that perimeter is violated by a big, strong puncher, that's when he tends to back off and his offense tends to shut down. So if he can fight to the best of his ability against Cyril Gane, sure. But if he's much like against Dominic Reyes, where he couldn't find his rhythm at all, like he just couldn't get it. I thought Dominic Reyes won the first 3 fights. I watched 3 rounds. I've watched that fight a million times. I thought Reyes won it. If he fights like that, it's going to be a long night for Jon Jones. He has to mentally get over that hump of somebody being as big as him, because he's small in the heavyweight division, and he's got to mentally deal with that. If you can deal with that in this fight, yeah, sky's the limit for him.
What is the heavyweight title to Jon Jones's legacy? We've talked about belt collecting. We've talked about, people moving up and this and that, but for what it's worth, I don't think John is doing it for the same reason, let's say, a Conor McGregor did it, right? He's not looking for the photo ops. I mean, because he's obviously not going to have the two belts at one time. But you asked me to name one of my greatest fighters of all time, and I said, John, I think that's cemented no matter what happens against Cyril Gane. But what does being the UFC heavyweight champion do to his already pretty cemented legacy?
Next level, man. I mean, he's my number one too. He's my number one. He wiped out 3 generations of light heavyweight. 3
so
generations
crazy.
of light heavyweight. It's crazy. He, Machida, Rampage, Machida, Rampage, Shogun Hua. They were all Rashad Evans, all that whole generation. Then the next one with Gustafson and Daniel Cormier and Glover Teixeira, and then the new guys, Dominic Reyes, Thiago Santos. Now you saw Anthony Smith, you saw him kind of in those fights where he didn't look as good. But dude, that's 3 generations of light heavyweights. I've never seen that in my entire life. All the years I've been watching. Also, especially in the beginning, he did it with style. You were going, holy shit. You couldn't believe what you were watching. So you had that wow factor that Anderson Silva had. And that's one of the reasons that we talk about greatest of all time. GSP didn't have a huge wow factor. He took you down, ground you down, beat you up, was technically very, very sharp. You didn't go, oh my God, what did I just see with GSP later on in his career? You did it early, you didn't late. And so John has that for sure. If he wins the title at heavyweight, I don't know. The only way you keep him out of number one spot is he's a cheater, he's a doper, I don't buy it. That's a moral thing. And if hey, fine. But the only way you keep him out is everything out of the octagon. No one's in octagon record is going to compare with his.
I couldn't agree more. And for my money, since we were talking trash talk, still the pound for pound number one greatest trash talk line of all time is him telling Daniel Cormier he beat him after a weekend of cocaine. I know your buddy Joe Rogan brings that one up all the time. I find it to be hilarious because I think in a weird way, I'm not advocating his drug use, but I think to be able to say that and actually go back and watch the fight and go, wow, that guy did that, just like that. It speaks to just
clearly while he was partying, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It gives Michael Jordan vibes. But very quickly on UFC 285, we're going to see Bo Nickel, we're going to see Shavkat, we're going to see Jalen Turner. And I know we have 2 title fights, but it feels a little more important when we have these marquee, not these, obviously every fight has a main event, but when we have these marquee main events with Jon Jones, it seems very smart, and it usually happens that the UFC sprinkles in the next coming in any certain division. Why do you like, or what do you like about putting a Bo Nickel on the same card that is headlined by Jon Jones, putting Shavkat, putting Jalen Turner in a fight against Mateusz Gamrot? It would have been nice to see, the Dan Hooker fight, but there's so many. I mean, Cody Garbrandt's going to be on here.
Mateusz Gamrot's a tougher fight.
I do
think
too.
Mateusz is a tougher fight. Yeah,
I do too. I don't think this is a walk in the park for Jalen Turner at all. But I mean, through and through, bottom to top, we'll see what happens with Cody Garbrandt going back up to 135. Ian Gary's back. Jillian Marquez is going to fight. There's so many fighters that when you look back at this card 3 years from now, like, oh yeah. But I think the shine is obviously Valentina Shevchenko, Jon Jones, but the primer is definitely Bo Nickel, Shavkat, and the already mentioned Mateusz Gamrot, Jalen Turner fight. But do you like how they kind of sprinkle in this young talent rather than try to build a Jon Jones card with 3 title fights and so on?
What are you buying it for? Right? Once you have me hooked and you have Jon Jones, then it's okay. What do we showcase for the future? We're already making my money on Jon Jones as a promotion. So the rest is you're banking in the future, right? You're hedging your bets because this is not expensive talent. If you want 3 or 4 title fights on a card, you're spending a lot of money to get eyeballs on something. And you got to ask yourself, when do you get diminishing returns? If I'm watching it for 2 title fights, you don't need a third one. Right? It's just, unless it's UFC 300 or something huge, you don't need that. So I think it's a brilliant idea, which is Jon Jones is our current moneymaker. But Bo Nickel's our moneymaker of the future. Shavkat Rakhmonov is our moneymaker of the future. Jalen Turner is our moneymaker of the future. And we have to put investment in the future. One of the things that killed boxing, in my opinion, they're coming back from it last few years, but for years, you're talking about the same names for 20 fucking years. And it just became, what do you think of the future of boxing? Well, who's the number 1 boxer in the world? Floyd Mayweather. How many years have you been saying that? Oh yeah, good point. I had a million conversations like, dude, we're talking about Manny Pacquiao. Well, you shit. I've been watching Manny Pacquiao since the 90s. Like we're not talking about who's next. We're talking about these same old names. And the UFC knows it has to invest in that future product. That's why you put the Bo Nichols and the Jalen Turners and the Shavkat Rakhmanovs on that card. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think obviously when you sprinkle in that young, and my uncle, who I've been getting into the sport more recently over the past 2 years, Bo Nichols is his favorite fighter, and he's seen him on Contender Series. He's like, I can't wait. So when I said, hey, Jon Jones is fighting the same night, this is how I had to say it to a very casual fan. Hey, Jon Jones is fighting the same night as Bo Nichols. He's like, we're ordering the fight. You're not going out. You're watching it here. Perfect. That works for me. I get to hear the broadcast perfectly. But Jimmy, before I let you go, the day after my birthday next month is Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman 3, UFC 286. I truly believe you're a good friend, John Anik, and you've done great work. I've told you this 100 times, and all the times I've had the pleasure to talk to you. I truly believe in that moment before Leon Edwards lands the head kick on Kamaru Usman in their last fight. I don't know if anyone could have called that moment more perfectly than John Anik did. But now that's all over, right?
He saved the call.
It's just perfect.
He saved the call. Saved the call, because without that, it's this guy's about to lose. This guy's about to lose, and the tone is down, right? And they get a head kick knockout, and it reverses what they were saying. And you generally, as a broadcaster, don't want to get caught in that position, right? You always want to tease that someone could win. You never want to lead the audience to this is hopeless, because then the click, why am I watching it? It's hopeless, right? And Anik did the perfect thing to throw that, but you don't know, and then boom, like it was perfect. And without that, yeah, it's all down at the wrong time.
I don't want to take anything away from Kamaru Usman, who will be 36 this year and one of the very best welterweight champions we've ever seen. But Leon Edwards, okay, so he's got the belt. He got the revenge. He did so in miraculous fashion. No disrespect to Leon, but we're talking about a Kamaru Usman who's continuing to have hand surgery. He's talked about how bad his knees are. His good friend Will Harris told Rogan how bad his knees are. He's got to walk backwards downstairs. All these things kind of add up. Jimmy, am I crazy for thinking this could be an even better fight for Leon in their third matchup?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, the body it wears down. You don't realize how difficult these camps are and what they do to your body. And you only have so many in you before it's over. And that's the issue is how good Kamaru Usman is physically heading into this fight. The one thing that still has me leaning Kamaru Usman is not only did was he beating Leon Edwards in that second fight? He was beating the brakes off of him. His stand-up was better. His punch, everything was better. And then just got caught with a head kick. If it had been, he had been out wrestling him for 5 rounds and then got caught with a head kick, I'd be a little more concerned, but everything looked sharp. So if he can get one more good performance out of his body, he should win. How long the road goes after that with this next crop at 170 coming up. And, that's going to be a gigantic question. But you're right. If he's not physically at least 80%, it's going to be a tough night for him in London.
Yeah, and I think I would love to see Bilal Muhammad, Colby Covington. If not, I'd like to see Bilal on that on the backup slot. But you're right. The welterweight division is stacked. And, at one point when a Kamaru Usman was facing Tyron Woodley, I was like, come on, Tyron's winning all these fights. And then Kamaru just went in and dominated him. So maybe a turning of the tide here at 170. I do think Leon can get it done, but I don't want to keep you any much longer. Jimmy Smith, this has been great. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we don't go 2 years without talking again. Life's been a whirlwind for me, but I'm happy to see you doing everything that you've been doing. And I really can't say thank you enough. I learned a lot from working with you. I learned a lot listening to your show on Sirius XM, Unlocking the Cage. And, I just big thank you.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to you as well, Robot Mike. It is always a pleasure talking to you, my fellow human. Anytime you need me, just let me know, bud. All right.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Unlocking the Cage, weekdays 2 to 5 on Sirius XM Fight Nation and UFC Fight Camp on ESPN. Jimmy Smith, thank you so much.
Anytime.